Welcome, everybody. Don Giannetti here. I'm with Wesley Verhoeve. Is that how I pronounce it?
Close enough. Verhoeven.
Verhoeve? Okay. Wesley Verhoeve.
Yeah.
And Wesley is a photographer living in Europe and the United States. I know he's here a lot and did a book a couple years ago. How I met Wesley was I saw a I saw a little blog post, I believe, or maybe it was Medium or something about this book called Noticed. And I was intrigued. I went and took a look at it, really liked it. It's a self-published book. And by the way, Wesley, I think self-published books are the way to go. Absolutely. And I bought it and I was really intrigued and I've followed him ever since. Tell us a little bit about the book, and I'll tell you a little bit about what I got from the book after we hear. So it's a great story. I think Wesley set the world record for amount of photographs taken in a 6 month period.
Surely not. If you think about some of those OGs from, that would go out for photojournalism gigs. I know I spoke once to what's Jay's last name again? A super well-known photographer whose last name is escaping me right now. Jay.
Jay Mizell?
He Yes, Jay Mazel, there we go.
Oh yeah, he
He
shot a lot of film.
Yeah, he told me that he would go to Jerusalem. This is a very long time ago, but for a photojournalism gig. I don't recall what the publication was right now, but he said he would go for 6 weeks and he would be allowed to shoot 600 rolls of 35 millimeter, which is a lot of rolls.
Yes.
Imagine that kind of money. It was because film's never cheap. People film feels and is very expensive these days, but adjusted for inflation, it's actually not more expensive than back then. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I did indeed for this previous book shoot a lot. I tend to shoot a lot in general. So for what happened, the story behind Notice is that previous to the pandemic, I was in this process of about a 2 year time period where I moved cities every 3 months. So we're talking Mexico City, Tokyo, Buenos Aires, Berlin, those kinds of places. It was a full experience. I would be making work in all those places. The ninth of those cities was Vancouver, British Columbia, in Canada, beautiful city. And my intention was once again to be there for 3 months, make work. However, after 1 month, the pandemic happened. My actual home at the time was New York City, which was, of course, very rough in the especially early days of COVID. So it didn't seem wise to leave Vancouver and go back to New York in the middle of it all. But also, no one really knew how long this was going to take. I actually remember in the beginning they said it was going to be 8 to 10 weeks. You know,
Well,
and
at the beginning, it was 2 weeks.
oh my goodness, yeah.
2 weeks.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
And so I just ended up, extending in Vancouver as it kept going, and I couldn't work there. All my jobs were, of course, canceled, like everyone's, and because I'm a person that really thrives with some routine in this life, because as a freelance person, you don't have that routine of the office and the structure. So I always try to have some of my own routines, and at that point, the only thing I could really do is walk around that neighborhood. I was staying in a suburb of Vancouver, about the opposite of what I would usually seek out, because in all those trips previous, I would always seek out the busy city centers of these global metropolises and meet people on the street, take a have a conversation, and make a lot of work around that. And now in Vancouver, everything was different. I was in a suburb, no one was on the street. And what happened was I just ended up walking in that suburb every day around the same time, kind of midday for an hour or three, four. I ended up doing that for 123 days in a row, which equated, thanks to my trusty iPhone, to 1.6 million steps, or about 800 miles. So within that little small suburb, we're talking just a walkable suburb. I walked about 800 miles in that amount of time. Of course, had you told me in advance, hey, for the next body of work that you're going to make, you're going to be walking 800 miles, I would have not believed you. But that's what happened. And so in that period, I shot about 35,000 photos across many different cameras because I wasn't thinking about making a book. I was just shooting. I was just processing what was happening in the world through photography and giving myself a little bit of a semblance of a normal structure in my day while everything else was going crazy. And so, yeah, after a few weeks, I thought to myself, well, maybe maybe this work is interesting. It's different from my normal. Maybe some of these could be prints that I can sell to make up for my lost income. And time kept, and after a few months, I thought, well, maybe this could be a zine because I've been shooting for quite a few days now. And by the end of it, I thought, you know what? I think this could be a book. Uh, Most of the photos that I was taking, I didn't actually see because I was shooting so much also on film. And by the end of the 123 days, I ended up shipping a 7 pound package of film to my lab in New York. And then once those all came back, um, I was like, I think this could be a book. And so that's how that book came about. It's called Notice because what I learned from that period was I had to teach myself how to see differently. I had to look at the world around me much differently rather than running around and racing in the city. I had to slow down and walk this quote unquote boring suburb. And as I did that, I started recognizing that in that tiny again, boring environment, it was actually a universe of beauty and wonder and surprise and humor. I just had never taken the time to actually observe it, to notice it. And so that's why that body of work is called Notice. Um, and in 2021, I published that book. And it was all work that was shot in that period in Vancouver. And I'm super proud with how that came out. I'm really happy to hear that you really enjoyed it as well. Yeah, so that's how that book came about.
Yeah, it's a really interesting book. It resonated with me because one of the things that I teach my students and that I believe is that I don't care where you are, when you are there is a photograph in front of you.
Mm,
But we don't let ourselves see it because we became photographers. So the only time we see photographs is when we're on assignment or, hey, it's photograph Sunday and I'm going to go out this afternoon and find some photographs. You don't have to leave the house. You don't have to leave your
mhm.
neighborhood. They're there. You just have to let yourself see them. And I saw that instantly when I saw the book, and you have a beautiful page on the website. It'll all be linked below, by the way, here on YouTube or Facebook, wherever this video ends up. There'll be links to the book. Beautiful um, two-page spreads that, even though they're images of a neighborhood, grass, a telephone pole, wonderful. I think it's a orange umbrella leaning against a building. It's just a delightful
Mhm.
photograph. But you have these pairings. And then instantly I saw the pairings, I went, oh, this is interesting. These pairings are perfect. From a photo editor's eye, they're perfect. And later I read that you worked with a pretty creative, heavy duty creative person to put that book together, right?
Dan Rubin.
Dan Rubin,
Yeah,
yeah.
my good friend Dan Rubin, who is the designer of the book and also helped me with after I made a selection with kind of like tweaking the selection and coming up with sequence and the pairing. We really did it together. Yeah, I'm glad you noticed right away, no pun intended, the pairings because that was a really cool part of the process. When, as I mentioned before, when I was shooting the work that ended up being this book, I wasn't thinking about it being a book, and I wasn't doing anything intentional to create these pairings. But what happened was after I narrowed the body down to let's say 400 photos, and I started making test prints and spreading them out on the floor, I started noticing that certain photos wanted to be together. They were what I like to call they were echoing each other, even though they
Mhm.
were taken weeks or months apart and in different parts of the suburb. There's a photo which you may remember of like a garden hose on a lawn in a certain kind of shape, and then I noticed that there's this other photo of this branch on the ground in exactly the same
Yeah.
shape.
Yep.
And that's like a very obvious pairing. And then there's also many pairings that are more nuanced and more subtle, and they either made me laugh or the thing that I was looking for was either a pairing had to make me laugh or chuckle. Really, it's not really a big ha, but it's more of a chuckle, or it had to confuse me a little bit so that I really had to look closely as to what I was actually looking at. So like a mystery and a humor is what I was going. And so as I was creating the sequence, I realized, well, this is going to be a bunch of left page, right page pairing. So there's a kind of a mathematical sequence to it. I have a background in making music and producing albums of music, and so the way I approached this sequence of this book was very much the way I would sequence an album or write a song. So there's like let's say 75% of the book is black and white and 25% is color, and the color appears almost as a sort of percussion in the book. So sometimes it's a little surprising. You turn the page and pop, there's a pop of color to break the flow. And the book itself is intended to be very meditative so that you can very slowly leaf through it and really pay attention and see what's going on. And then a little bit of a percussive moment with some color. And that's really kind of what I was going for with it.
It really works out well. Um,
Thank you.
I think what was fascinating to me also was how you marketed the book. We're going to talk a little marketing here because I thought it was genius, by the way. You marketed the book through the creation of the book.
Mm.
And when you follow the link, folks, and below you're going to go down, you have a whole series on your blog where you talk about the idea of the book, putting the pictures together, choosing the paper, figuring out what color the cover is going to be. That I thought was fascinating. I'm a designer as well as a photographer, and
Mm.
it was so well done. It's a master class for photographers on what to do to put something like this together. And it's really gracious for you to do that. I mean, a lot of what you talked about is the stuff that nobody talks about.
Mm.
So that was
Yeah, I
really,
love sharing the process of it all because I find that interesting and important. The end result is the end result, but if we're not enjoying and learning during the process, then it's just so much less satisfying and less important, I think. And so my newsletter, which is also after I send the newsletter, becomes a blog basically, but it's also called Process specifically because every week when I send out a new issue, I take you behind the scenes into the process of whether it's making a book or starting a project or whatever it might be that I'm working on that week. And I really, yeah, I really enjoy giving that insight into every little step and also through that demystifying the process because I
Mhm.
think it's really important that people realize that even if it's just a one copy for yourself or a couple of copies for your friends and family, with if I show you every part of the process, you can totally do it too in one way or another. You can even just do it at Kinko's with if you follow the steps that I share.
Absolutely. And I think it also helps people realize that the process is part of what we do.
Hmm.
That as a photographer, we don't just take the picture. We have to think about how we're going to present the picture. And that presentation is part of everything we do. I've been shooting for a long time. I've probably been shooting longer than you've been alive. So
I think so.
um,
Pretty
I'm
cool.
I take photographs when the camera goes to my eye. I see the finished picture already.
Hmm.
I see it. I see it printed and framed. Now that does not mean that once it gets back on the computer or once I get the scan that I'm not going to have a change of heart. But it does mean that I'm absolutely deliberate in what that picture is going to look like. I can see it, and I think that when we get, I think you do too, as well. Judging from the work that I've seen from you, um, if we
I'm not
don't,
sure, to be honest. I think I do. Well, my favorite way of taking photos is when I reach a flow state in which I'm
Mhm.
not thinking at all.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I'm just responding to the world around me or the subject, and I am just um, I'm of course I'm composing and I'm looking at color and light, but it is very instinctual and not as intellectual. That comes later in the edit, not the edit as in Photoshop, but the edit as in what's the crop of this or where do I put it?
Right. Yes,
Yeah.
I've always been a little pushback on they when the terminology is edit when you're talking Photoshop. For me, that's post-processing. Editing
Yes, you're
is
right, of
looking
course.
at 3,500 images and trying to find the 400 in the right cropping that are going to mix together. Um,
Absolutely. That is the real definition, but I feel that that's kind of gotten lost, so I always
pretty
like to
pretty much
clarify.
lost.
Yeah.
Now you can edit on your phone. Well, anyway, um, no, it's fascinating. You've just finished, I believe. I've noticed that the last issue of Process, you were looking at the last little detail of the book,
Hmm.
which is the stitching of the book and the color of the stitching.
That's right. So that's now we're talking about my next book,
This new one, yes.
which is a bit of a sequel in a sense to Notice, and it is also called Notice Journal Volume One. Volume One is, of course, indicating that this is the first book in a series. And th this book takes that theme that we just spoke about noticing the beauty and the wonder around you that we can tend to race right past. And it's taking that element of pairing to another level. I loved in my editing process of the book that process that you described so much, where I just started discovering these echoing photos that I decided that I wanted to lean into that even more, but take away control from myself. And so this current body of work that is the next book, fully shot on film in a half frame camera. And you know what that means, but for those of the people who don't know what that means you a roll of 36 images. If you put that roll into a half frame camera, it's actually 72 images. And so one frame of a 35 millimeter film is two pictures side by side, um, which makes it a pairing. Now clearly that's not how this camera was intended. This camera was intended to just get 72 photos on it. But the way I've started using it is I create these diptychs, these pairings in camera. And that was very enjoyable for me because, like I said, it took away even more control and it gave a little bit more to chance, to luck. No, not necessarily luck, but to chance, let's say. And so the body work that I created for that was very, very fun because I wouldn't really know what I had until I got the scans back. This book was fully shot in black and white on double X cinema film, and these pairings were not really intentional pairings in the sense that I thought, okay, I took this photo, now I will take that photo. I was just in my flow state shooting, and so when I would get the scans back, I would see which ones ended up being pairs and also plenty that didn't, of course. And so I'm super excited about kind of like having discovered this for myself. Obviously, I'm not the only person who's ever done this, but I think it might be the only photo book that's ever been done like this so far. And I would love to be corrected if that's not true. But yeah,
Well,
I'm really excited about it.
I have to tell you this. I I
Tell me.
I shot a fashion shoot back in 1980, 1981 for a local store here, and I shot it on half frames and diptychs.
That's amazing. I'd love
Uh,
to, I would love to see that
I would
if
love
you
to
still
see
have
it
that
too.
somewhere.
It's buried somewhere, but I'll find it. Yeah, I shot it with the Olympus pen, little Olympus pen.
That's what I
Um,
used.
yeah, great.
Yeah.
Do you have the one that you can change the values, the shutter speed, etc. on it?
Yeah.
Do you have the
Hmm.
one that you just sort of, I think it's F8 and B there or something.
I think the one that I have, it's actually my friend's camera that I've long-term borrowed, but it just lives with me. It's a Pen F, and there's also a Pen FT. which has a light meter. The pen F that I use doesn't have a light meter. It's just fully manual, and yeah, you can adjust anything really.
Yeah, I bought after seeing you do it, brought memories back from my pen that I wore it out, actually it broke. And I went on eBay and bought one, but the one I have, I don't have full control over aperture
Ah, okay.
shutter, and I think it might be shutter. Um, but it does have a little photomic thing on the front, little photometer on the front, so it sets the
Oh, okay.
aperture
Yeah,
automatically.
that's a different one. Yeah, that's a different one. But they're all great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the first roll I put through it, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled with it. But yeah, I did the model looking at the camera and then the model moving slightly over here, and I shot them in pairs. Now
very cool.
you're shooting the half frame in pairs. The pictures in the books are the pictures that were next to each other when you shot them, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah,
And that's important. That's it's not like you went through all the shots and found this one from here and this one from here and put them together just because they're half frame. You shot the diptychs right there.
right. That's
Yeah,
correct.
that's fun. That's really fun.
Yeah, because it creates this process for me as the maker that surprises me as well. You know,
Yeah.
because like I said, I get the scans back and I'm like, ooh, that's a really lovely, echo of a shape or a movement. It's really fun to kind of discover my own brain in a way, you know. Plus, this book was shot across the past three spring seasons. And the theme of the book is also that spring is kind of a metaphor for coming out of a kind of a challenging period, like a metaphorical winter, if you will. And then when you're kind of coming out of that difficult period in your life, spring is kind of there. The blue sky is suddenly there. You're starting to feel the sun again. And so I think most of us have gone through challenging periods in our life, one way or another. And this was my way of processing one of those periods. And so one thing that I love about the diptych format as well is that it tells a story across two images, and one is essentially looking back and one is looking forward. So
Oh,
that
okay.
becomes a sort of a poetic interpretation of the format of this film.
That's very cool. You know, but is it all right if I share some pictures
Yeah,
from the
sure.
oh, let me share my screen here. Wait, let me do this first. There we go. And and here we have a couple of pairings. A few more on here. What we call
Where the previous book was fully shot in Vancouver, this book was fully shot in Amsterdam.
oh, okay.
Yeah. So all these images are Amsterdam.
And this is
Not,
on the
not that you would really necessarily recognize that unless you're extremely well versed and detail oriented in Amsterdam. But
yes.
uh, it's not a travel book about Amsterdam, really. It just happens to be where I live.
Yeah, they're lovely pairings. Tell us the film you used is cinema film?
It's a cinema film, yeah. It's the same film that Scorsese used for Raging Bull. It's the same film that Spielberg used for Schindler's List. And so it's made by Kodak for filmmakers. However, you can also buy it in bulk and and roll it into your in canisters yourself. Or in my case, my friend Tim does that for me.
Excellent. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna look into that. I'm not familiar with
It
that
predates
film.
Tri-X, so it's called Double X because it predates Tri-X.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's a different kind of grain. It's very atmospheric. It's very um nuanced. I really love it.
These are beautiful.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, I live in the
This
desert.
one you can see that it's Amsterdam, of course, because of the building.
I live in Arizona where we have no we don't really have cloudy, dark
Right.
days, occasionally, but so shooting high speed film, my favorite film has always been since the day it was released was Kodak 3200.
Right. Well, this is actually just I shoot this on 200 ISO. So you should be able to do that.
Yeah, that this film reminds me of that, the 3200.
Ah,
So I'm thinking I have to really look into this. This looks really great. I've learned something today. Very good. Love these.
thank you.
These are photo walk shots? You're just basically this is your like free time, or are they during shoots? Do you ever shoot your personal work while you're doing an assignment?
Sometimes, but not in this case.
Okay.
This is just yeah, taking walks. But intentionally so. They're not like I'm not just randomly walking. I was in these walks to process those feelings. And the way I've taught myself to process feelings is through making, through creating photos.
So the process is very different than the first book that you did, in that
Uh,
those were um, almost like you say you hadn't done that before in a rural area.
not really. Yeah, it's true. And I wouldn't necessarily call it rural, more suburban, but yeah, that
Right.
was a new experience for
Yeah.
me. And
It's
in that case, I was also effectively processing feelings and kind of learning about the world as we were all going through this difficult COVID. But in this case, it was more of a personal thing.
so this is fascinating. When you shot, for instance, obviously you shot the, if I get you shot the pot first.
Hmm.
How long was it, if you can remember? How long was it from the pot to the
Oh,
color?
it's usually just a few minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, because I shoot a lot. When I'm shooting a lot. So a roll, even though it's 75, 72 images, a lot of people have trouble with that. They think like, oh, it's going to take me weeks to fill it. I can, when I was making this work, I was shooting 5, 6 rolls per day, which is, 300 something photos, which if you're shooting digital, that doesn't seem like much, but if you're shooting film, that is kind of a lot.
Right. Yes. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I love and again, this is one of those pairings that you look at it initially and you think, well, what's the relationship? And you
Mm.
look a little bit longer and you go, oh, start to see the relationships between it. Um, and it becomes a very, I hate to use the word clever because that sounds, it's not clever. It's deliberate and and an aesthetic that
Mm.
is that is really interesting, which is what photography for me is all about. I mean, this is the world of photography. Now, I don't know if you know, Wesley, but you can go to Midjourney and you could generate this stuff and stay home. I mean, you know,
Yeah, but how many feelings will you be processing,
none,
Don?
absolutely zero. There's no
Yeah.
feeling at all. It's yeah,
And I'm, no dis people who generate images in that way. That's just not my thing. I do it because I have to. I'm not doing it for fun in a
right.
sense, even though I might have fun doing it, but I do this because I have to do it.
Yes. When people have asked me, why are you a photographer? What do you get out of it? I said, I don't do it for any other reason, but I have to. I have to make pictures, and I
Yeah,
can't explain it. I don't even want to explain it.
yeah, no. And
It's
here you can see this pairing was seconds apart because that's on the right we see probably, if I remember correctly, it's just a window next to the door.
wow. Um, every shoot is a learning experience, right?
Hmm.
What did you learn from this differently than what you learned from Notice? Because you mentioned what you learned from Notice is to see the world that we walk by all the time because we're
Mm.
not thinking about being a photographer. And then you approach that part of the world as a photographer and are surprised and delighted and amazed. What did you learn from this?
I would say where Notice was a meditation. Notice Journal Volume One was more therapy. So I would say a meditation is something where I connect with the world outside of me, and therapy, and of course, this is not a substitute for a real therapist, but art can be therapy as well. And whereas meditation is me connecting with the world, the therapy is really more so me connecting with my feelings and expressing it. Through an observation that somehow in my mind gets linked to this feeling that I'm feeling.
Beautiful. Oh, there you go. Yeah. Who processes your film? I know you have a lab that you use a lot. It's always on your
Mhm.
process.
I do all my film with Carmencita, which is a film lab in Spain, and also they also have one in Lisbon in Portugal, but the one that I send it to is in Valencia in Spain. Best lab I've ever worked with, and I've worked with quite a few.
Fantastic. Um,
Yeah.
for those the viewers watching who do a lot of film, do you have any idea what developer solution they're using? Or
No, but they do, they have different things. And what I love about them is that they put so much love and care into it that they also files for all their customers to know what their preferences are. So, for example, some photographers prefer flat scans, and so that they can do a lot to it themselves. I do not prefer that. I just want them to be the way I would do to myself, and Carmencita knows exactly what that means. And so whether it's color or black and white, they come back. I basically don't have to touch them at all because they understand me. And so that also, I think, applies to how they develop things. So this is, of course, a very grainy film. You're gonna treat this differently in the lab versus super slick, fine grain, let's say Ilford 50, Pan F50. That's going to be a different process. But I can't tell you exactly what they use, but they have stuff on their website about that.
that's great. I'll link to them as well.
Yeah.
So this is an exciting time when your book is coming out. I mentioned earlier that I'd like to talk about books. I think that the photo book is becoming more and more the art piece for photographers. The
Mm.
book as the art piece itself. We still have prints
Hmm.
and those types of things, but I'm finding myself being drawn more to the self-published small run books by photographers that are so much more interesting than, well, I mentioned in my email to you the heyday of book photography, of
Mm.
photo books. And that was, I would say, the 80s, the mid 70s
Mm.
to the 80s. Oh, you go down to the bookstore and there'd be like 15 and you have to get a second job just to buy them. Just everything. And I don't see that very much in the bookstores anymore. I'm not.
Yeah, that's true. I think it's not, it's not an easy business, the book business, and let alone the art book business. But I do have to agree with you. I think it's a very special medium. It allows us to, especially in the way that I work with this kind of work, it allows us to place images into context
Yes.
and give them a certain richness that they wouldn't have on their own. The process of bookmaking that, as I describe it, as I break it down step by step, one of the most important ones is sequencing. That you can completely change the impact of a photo depending on where in the sequence it lives or where on the page it lives. There's so many different ways to tell a story, and some are better than others. And so I'm also very grateful to work on this book once again with Dan Rubin. the cover is designed by Maxwell George, but the interior is designed by Dan Rubin once again, and he has such creative ways of helping me place images on a page. The Because the first book was a meditation, it was a repetitive pattern. It was left page, right page, 7 pairs in a row, one solo photo, 7 pairs, one solo photo, 7 pairs, because the feeling that I was trying to generate with the reader was the same feeling that I had on the street: meditation, calm. Whereas in this case, this book is a lot more playful. And so you see that in the not only in the sequencing, but also in the page. So rather than having one photo on left page, one photo on right page, there's so many fun different ways in this book that we show the photos. Sometimes it is one diptych on left page, one diptych on the right page. Sometimes it's two little ones and two little ones next to each other. Sometimes there's three up above each other. This project is really even more intimate and even more personal, because the kind of like the framework of a journal as opposed to a straight up old school fine art book, which is what the previous one was. This gives me this opportunity to be playful with things. So this has a gatefold cover. There's more writing in this book by other people that I admire. There's even this book even has a recipe by a James Beard award-winning food writer who works for the New York Times, and that recipe speaks to the theme that the images speak. Nostalgia of the spring season, the way that spring can give us a feeling of hope and a renewal. And so I asked her if we could have a recipe that speaks to that. There's also an essay by the incredible Caroline Cala Donofrio. She's one of my favorite writers and a friend, and she wrote a personal essay that speaks to the same theme, but from her point of view. And so I love that in this book I can have that extra bit of freedom to be playful with things, also in the way that we've laid out the pages.
Yes, and that context and that ability to add more flavor,
Mm.
no pun intended about the recipe there, but more flavor to
Yeah.
it. It's a different way of showing work than
Mm.
a print on a wall, which
Yep.
is still
Which is
lovely,
also great. Yeah.
still a wonderful way to do it. This just gives us another way to put our images out there and say, this book is a series of images for you to enjoy, but it's also that series itself is part of the art. And
Absolutely.
yeah, it's really fabulous. Really fabulous. So tell us what's on the plate next. What's your next project? Because I have a feeling
Well,
that you like projects.
I do like projects. Well, first, my whole focus is getting this book out, and that will on Sunday, October 20th, which that's the week that we're recording this. That it goes up for pre-order. It's a pretty small print run of only 500. So I'm on Sunday it goes live, and then we'll see how fast it goes. The previous book, Notice, the first print was 1,000, and that was pretty much sold out in the pre-order period. And then there's a second print now of that book, also 1,000. So this book, might be gone pretty fast if all goes well. So I would say get on it if you're interested. And after that is out, I have a few things associated with it. Like there's a couple of retail stores that I'm collaborating with for this book. And I am working on several other projects at the same time right now, including one called The Best Medicine. I just spent the whole weekend previous to this one working on that. It's very different from this. It's a way to document a community that I find very interesting, that I also happen to be part of, which is the English language comedy community of Amsterdam. Amsterdam, of course, being a city where English is not the native language, and it's a very interesting moment in time for this right now, because English is spoken more and more here because of all the people coming from other places. but for an English language comedy community to be so um, present is very unusual. And so I thought this is a very special moment in time, and I want to document that. So what I did the past 2 days is we got into the studio and I photographed 101 people in English language comedy in the city of Amsterdam.
Wow.
And it's a crazy project. It was exhausting. I had an amazing team working with me, and I'm super excited about it. But that's just the beginning of that. So that will be more of an early next year type of thing.
Now, will that end up being a book or a
I'm
show?
not 100% sure yet. It'll probably be a show. And I'm thinking in my mind, one of the ideas I'm playing with is kind of a rather than a formal book, a more of a newsprint type of thing. Um, but we'll have to see what I always kind of like let projects tell me what they want to be. So I don't
Mhm.
try to like think too far ahead on it.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
This is fantastic. I'm going to link to your great newsletter. I think
Thank you.
one of the best newsletters out there for photographers, whatever kind of photography that you do. This is definitely one. Um, and to the book, noticed, and to the pre-release on Sunday. So it's Monday today. I think we'll get this video up on Wednesday. So will there be a link for the pre-order?
Not
Doesn't
yet.
go
You're
up
gonna
till
have to wait
Sunday.
till Sunday for the link.
Okay. So
Yeah.
we'll send it up and you'll have to remind yourself to get there Sunday, folks. So we'll see what happens with that.
Maybe I'll make a special link for you, Don, and you can include it.
Ah, fantastic. I would love that. Wesley, it's been wonderful chatting with you, my friend.
Likewise, very much, very nice to finally meet. I've been very much enjoying your newsletter for quite a long time now, and I'm very grateful for your presence on Substack, which is the platform that we're both right on. And I think, yeah, it's uh, it's so great to see that people are kind of stepping away from only sharing on social media, where it's flighty and quick, and leaning into the world of the newsletter where you can really take your time and explain things or show the process or go deeper or show the kind of images that might not work on social media. I'm very grateful for that in this moment of time. And yours is one of my favorites.
Oh, thank you. Yours is mine as well. I got to tell you, I love the one you did about the backyard studio. Uh,
Oh, fun.
that's fun. That was really a blast. It's great to
Thank you.
it's great to see that kind of creativity out there. All right. Thank you very much for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All righty. Fantastic, man.
Cool.
You feel good?
Yeah, yeah, totally.